Saito and Akane have been at each other's throats for as long as they've known each other, and today is no different. Akane is yelling at him about something. He doesn't care enough to figure out what, and he simply tells her to leave him alone. Unfortunately, that only fuels the fire, escalating their argument even further. Hinamari, one of Akane's friends, walks over and watches the chaos unfold with amusement. She's always found it hilarious how these two can't go 5 minutes without bickering. Akane seems way too invested in Sato's every move, almost like she cares. The realization hits, and Hinamari can't help but voice her suspicion. Akane, absolutely disgusted, immediately shuts that theory down. She'd rather have a cockroach burrow into her ear than develop feelings for him. Saito, equally horrified, insists that dating Akane would be a fate worse than death. After a long day of school and senseless arguing, Saito heads home. His phone rings unexpectedly, and when he answers, his grandfather is on the line, inviting him over for tea. Saito has better things to do. He's not interested in wasting his time on some sentimental tea date with his grandpa. But Temiya Hojo, the man who single-handedly saved the Hojo group from ruin and built it into a global tech empire, doesn't take no for an answer. He reminds Saito that he's already named him the heir to his massive fortune. So the least the boy can do is spend some quality time with his dear old pop-pop while he's still breathing. Saito still isn't feeling it. But unfortunately for him, Temu is well-versed in the art of kidnapping his own grandson. Moments later, a limo pulls up beside him, flanked by armed guards. Saito briefly considers making a break for it, channeling his inner track star and sprinting for his life. But then remembers that his grandfather is absolutely unhinged enough to have him shot and hospitalized. Deciding that getting in the car is the smarter option, he sighs and complies. As they drive, Saito asks where they're taking him. The guards, knowing full well their boss is a lunatic, apologize for the inconvenience. They explain that their orders are to bring him to a villa, but they have no clue what Temu is plotting. Temiya Hojo, one of the wealthiest and most powerful men on the planet, built his empire from nothing. Despite his eccentric methods, there's no denying that he deeply values his grandson, though it's still unclear if that's a blessing or a curse. Meanwhile, Sato's father seems to care more about his obsession with milk than his own son. Eventually, they arrive at the estate. Saito, unimpressed, takes a seat outside to wait for his grandfather. Akane appears out of nowhere, and the first thing she does? Yell at him. She demands to know what he's doing there, to which Saito replies that his grandfather dragged him over. Turns out, Akane's grandmother invited her for tea as well. Now things are getting suspicious. Neither of them has any idea what's going on, but since they can't be in the same space without arguing, they start bickering all over again. Right on cue, Temu and Akane's grandmother arrive, announcing that they have something important to discuss. They usher everyone inside, where a grand feast has been prepared for an occasion Saito has yet to understand. As he surveys the table, Saito notices that Akane hasn't even touched her food. Feeling mildly concerned, he asks if she's okay. Unfortunately, his moment of sincerity is wasted. Akane shoots him a glare and declares that his hideous face completely destroyed her appetite. The two immediately start arguing again, much to the amusement of their grandparents, who watch with nostalgia, reminiscing about their own heated exchanges back in high school. Saito, already at his limit, pinches the bridge of his nose and demands to know what this whole charade is about. Without missing a beat, the elderly duo drops an absolute bomb. Saito and Akane are getting married. The room goes silent. For a moment, Saito and Akane are convinced they must have misheard. There's just no way these two fossils are seriously suggesting marriage, especially since they're still in high school. But as it turns out, Tenryu and Chiyo are dead serious. And the explanation? Somehow even worse. Tenryu and Chiyo have known each other since childhood and were once deeply in love, but thanks to a series of petty arguments, they drifted apart. They both went on to marry other people, living separate lives, until time did its thing and both of their spouses ended up 6 feet under. Free from their past baggage, the two reconnected, rekindling their romance. They've decided to live out their lost love story through their grandkids. Akane is mortified. Marriage is something that should happen out of love, not because two senile old bats want to live vicariously through them. To make matters worse, Chiyo has the audacity to tell Akane she'll be expecting a full report on what Sato's backshots feel like later. Saito, still processing the sheer absurdity of the situation, points out the obvious. It's literally illegal to force minors into marriage. They can't possibly make this happen. But Tenryu has been playing this game for far longer than they have. He was expecting resistance, which is why he came prepared with blackmail. With a simple gesture, the doors swing open, and the ultimatum is revealed. Either Saito marries Akane, or the dog dies. Saito blinks. That's not his dog. He genuinely has no emotional investment in whatever random mud his grandfather is using as a hostage. But Tenryu isn't done. If Saito refuses, he'll be completely cut off, disowned, removed from the family registry, and most importantly, erased from the will. That gets Sato's attention. Now suddenly marriage to Akane isn't looking entirely off the table. But Akane is still firmly against it. Chiyo calls Akane over, leaning in to whisper something in her ear. Whatever she says must be serious, because Akane instantly stiffens. Tenryu lays down the final condition. They have 3 days to make a decision. Then, just like that, the two elders zoom off, no doubt, so Tenryu can continue his regularly scheduled back-blowing duties. Once their grandparents are gone, Akane turns to Saito, asking what they're supposed to do. But for once, neither of them has an answer. Getting Kiss 1 would be an absolute disaster for Saito, but before he starts panicking, he needs to understand just how bad things really are. So, he asks Akane about the threat her grandma made, wanting to gauge the severity of her situation. Akane, however, immediately gets defensive, refusing to tell him. It's a private matter, and there's no way she's about to spill her personal business to him, of all people. Later that night, Akane lies in bed, her mind racing. No matter how hard she tries, she has never managed to surpass Saito. What infuriates her even more is that he doesn't even seem to try, yet he still comes out on top every time. It's unbearable. Frustrated and needing advice, she calls Himari, explaining her totally hypothetical situation, being forced to marry someone she absolutely cannot stand. Himari is baffled, wondering how stuff like that still happens in this day and age. Akane then flips the question on her, asking what she would do in the same situation. Himari doesn't hesitate. She would refuse without a second thought. She already has someone she likes, and there's no way she would marry anyone else. That catches Akane off guard. She never knew Himari had a crush, probably because Himari had never mentioned it before. Or maybe, just maybe Akane never bothered to ask. Naturally, Akane demands the details, but Himari keeps the guy's identity under wraps for now. She hasn't confessed yet, though she does admit that he's someone from their class. After talking about Himari's love life enough for one night, the conversation takes a turn. Himari asks Akane if she is in love with anyone. Akane doesn't even need to think about it. She's never had the time or the patience for romance. Right now, the only emotion she feels is an overwhelming hatred for a certain someone. Since Akane doesn't have a crush, Himari suggests that maybe it wouldn't be so bad if she just went along with what her grandparents wanted. Think about it, assuming this hypothetical husband isn't a serial killer, they could just live together, split rent and bills, and save a ton on living expenses. Meanwhile, back at his house, Saito is in full-blown panic mode. It's bad enough dealing with one candidate constantly breathing down his neck at school, but if they actually get married, that means he'll be stuck with her relentless nagging forever. His cousin, Shiz, immediately picks up on his distress and asks what's wrong. With a heavy sigh, Saito spills everything. How their grandpa is threatening to disown him if he doesn't comply with his ridiculous demands. Shiz doesn't even blink. Yeah, that definitely sounds like something their grandpa would do. She asks what he plans to do about it. She's perfectly fine if he decides to walk away from the company. Even if he ends up broke and living under a bridge, she'll still love him just the same. But she also knows that Saito has big dreams. Dreams that will never become reality without access to the Hojo group's resources. Whatever he decides, she promises to be by his side every step of the way. And honestly, that means everything to Saito. 3 days pass, and both Saito and Akane meet with their grandparents, ready to deliver their decisions. And just like that, they announce that they'll go through with the marriage. But, of course, their grandparents aren't satisfied with just that. Saito and Akane assumed they had some time, maybe at least until graduation, before they had to make anything official. But Tenryu and Chiyo have other plans. They expect their grandkids to start living as a married couple immediately. Before either of them can argue, they're shoved into a brand new house that their grandparents generously arranged for them. And then, just like that, Tenryu and Chiyo speed off, leaving them behind. Akane immediately freaks out. She can't just suddenly live with Saito like this. Meanwhile, Saito, who has built up a resistance to his grandpa's insanity, barely reacts. At this point, nothing surprises him anymore. Still, as they step inside, they have to admit the house is really nice. Fully furnished, stocked with everything they could possibly need. If Akane didn't have to share it with him, she might have actually enjoyed living here. But then they notice a problem. There's only one bed. Immediately, they call their grandparents to complain, only to find out that this was very intentional. Their grandparents demand that they sleep together in the same bed every single night. And just to add insult to injury, Chiyo wishes Akane luck with the inevitable pounding she's about to receive. Saito quickly puts 2 and 2 together. If their grandparents were crazy enough to force them into living together, then they were definitely crazy enough to set up hidden cameras to spy on them at night. Which is, highly illegal. While Saito is busy worrying about illegal surveillance, Akane is far more concerned about the other nightmare scenario, sharing a bed with him. Hesitantly, she asks if he really intends to do it tonight. Saito has no idea what she's talking about. Just to be safe, she threatens to stab him with her comically large pencil if he even thinks about trying something. Then, she sprints out of the room. For now, they still need to unpack. Akane carries her stuff upstairs. Saito, being mildly considerate, asks if she needs help. Akane immediately rejects him. Except after taking just a few steps, she loses her footing and falls backward. Saito catches her just in time. She's completely fine, uninjured, and unfortunately, still alive to keep annoying him. He sighs and tells her to be a little more careful because if she does end up dying, he's going to be the prime murder suspect. Once everything is unpacked, Saito finds a meal their grandpa left for him. He warms up the pizza and is about to dig in when he notices Akane hovering nearby, clearly catching a whiff of the food. She's starving, but too stubborn to ask for a slice. Saito sighs and gives her a piece anyway. She snatches it from him without a single word of thanks and immediately leaves. Saito wonders if this is what it's like to feed a stray cat. A few minutes later, he's ready for bed, so he heads to the bedroom, lays down, and closes his eyes, only to immediately remember that Akane is supposed to sleep here too. Akane walks in, equally tense. They already agreed that nothing is going to happen, but knowing that doesn't make it any less awkward. Saito quickly realizes there's no way he's going to fall asleep like this, so to distract himself, he starts a conversation. He asks Akane why she agreed to the marriage in the first place, but Akane refuses to answer. This whole thing is just a formality to her. She's only putting up with it for the sake of her dream, even if that means following their grandparents' weird rules. And that's when it hits Saito. If their grandparents can arbitrarily make up rules whenever they want, then it's only a matter of time before they decide to make a rule about having kids. Akane freezes as the horror sinks in. Oh my god, you're right. In her panic, she shifts too suddenly, and in the process, Saito accidentally touches her. But cue yet another fight breaking out. That brings us back to the present, where Akane firmly reminds Saito that under no circumstances is he allowed to tell anyone that they are married. Saito assures her that he already planned on keeping it a secret, but Akane still doesn't trust him. After all, what guy wouldn't want to brag about being married to her? The following day, they walk into the classroom together. Akane is immediately stopped by Himari, who had noticed her talking to Saito outside earlier. Curious, Himari asks what that was all about. Flustered and unwilling to let their secret slip, Akane quickly dismisses it as nothing. Himari, however, finds this response suspicious, especially since Akane had seemed angry at Saito before. Meanwhile, Saito takes his seat, only to look up and see Shizu standing in front of him, her face completely blank. Without a word, she steps closer and sniffs him. Picking up on the unfamiliar scent of his shampoo, she flatly asks where he slept last night. Wanting to keep his marriage to Akane a secret, Saito awkwardly averts his gaze and mutters an excuse about his dad buying some weird shampoo, so he's just trying it out. Shizu keeps her dull stare locked onto him. It's not just the shampoo, she remarks. You smell like a girl. Without another word, she leans in and gently bites his neck. Then, as if solving some grand mystery, she states, you must be married. Saito's eyes widen in shock. Before he can even formulate a response, Shizu nonchalantly reveals that she had already noticed some strange behavior from their grandfather in his company, so she took it upon herself to investigate. She even managed to track down their new house. Just as she's about to say he married Akana, Saito reacts fast. He covers her mouth and, without hesitation, drags her out of the classroom. He hauls her up a single flight of stairs, only to end up panting heavily at the top. Our boy seriously needs to start hitting the gym. She smirks, eyes gleaming with amusement, and informs him that she has absolutely no reason to keep his secret. After all, he never bothered to tell her about the marriage in the first place. However, she offers a deal. She'll keep quiet, but only under one condition. After a moment of thought, she finally names her price. From now on, his life will be in her hands. A couple of hours later, Saito slumps over his desk, completely drained after an intense PE class. Just as he starts to relax, Akane and Himari make their way over to him. Akane wastes no time scolding him for leaving the PE equipment out instead of properly putting it back in the storeroom. Saito immediately jumps to his own defense, explaining that since the next class would be using the equipment anyway, he figured it'd be helpful to just leave it out. Their back and forth quickly escalates, drawing entertained glances from their classmates. Later that afternoon, back at home, Saito is peacefully reading when a sudden, ear-splitting scream from the kitchen sends him rushing over. Upon arrival, he finds Akane frozen in front of the open fridge, her expression one of pure horror. She turns to him, demanding an explanation for why the fridge is overflowing with cans of juice. Unbothered, Saito calmly explains that he stocked up on concentrated vegetable juice because it's packed with vitamins and will make them healthier. Akane glares at him, unimpressed, snapping that it won't actually make them healthier since it completely lacks proper nutrition. Without missing a beat, Saito smirks and pulls open the second fridge, proudly revealing shelves upon shelves of cup noodles. Akane stares in stunned silence before unleashing another scream at full volume. Saito, completely misreading the situation, beams with pride, mistaking her reaction for sheer admiration. Confidently, he explains that her excitement is totally justified. After all, cup noodles are the peak of human cuisine. They're cheap, fast, and ridiculously convenient. Akane, now visibly distressed, rubs her temples before forcing herself to ask the dreaded question. Where exactly does he plan to get his protein? Akane makes a firm declaration. She's going to show him what real cooking looks like. Saito brushes her off, insisting that he's perfectly content with his protein shake. But before he can finish, she cuts him off sharply and orders him to sit down and watch. She swiftly ties on a cooking apron and dives into her work. As she moves around the kitchen, she steals a glance at Saito, who sits at the dining table with a blank expression, resembling a clueless puppy. She smirks, convinced that he's about to have his mind blown by her cooking. When the meal is finally ready, she places the plate in front of him and sits across the table, watching him eagerly. Saito picks up his chopsticks, but doesn't take a bite right away. Instead, he carefully inspects the dish, as if searching for hidden traps, perhaps a nail or some explosives. Once he's satisfied that she hasn't laced it with poison, he finally takes a bite. The moment the flavors hit his tongue, his eyes widen slightly. Memories of childhood meals resurface, stirring something deep inside him. A faint, almost nostalgic smile creeps onto his face. Akane, still observing him closely, asks what he thinks. To her shock, he simply calls it a basic home-cooked meal, but then he adds that to him, it means everything. Her jaw drops, offended beyond belief. She immediately snatches the plate away, declaring that if it's nothing special, she might as well feed it to the dogs. Saito panics, trying to grab the plate back while protesting that he never said it was bad. Akane, still fuming, snaps that he didn't say it was good either, leaving her seething as the two wrestle over the plate like children. In the end, Saito manages to snatch it back and starts scarfing down the food while Akane attempts to pry it away from him. Once he's finished, he calmly sets the empty plate on the table, claps his hands together in a quick prayer, and leans back, fully satisfied. The next morning, Akane storms into Saito's room, trying to wake him up for school. But Saito, completely knocked out, lost in a dream where he's peacefully cuddling in bed with his cousin, Shizue, still trapped in dreamland. He instinctively pulls Akane into bed, mistaking her for Shizue. For a brief moment, she's too stunned to react, but then reality slaps her in the face, and she shrieks at him to wake up. Both of them bolt upright, and Saito rubs his eyes before mumbling an apology, claiming he didn't realize she had come to wake him for school. Akane crosses her arms and glares at him. She didn't wake him up for school. She woke him up to scold him for leaving the dishes unwashed, since she had cooked dinner the night before. She insists it's only fair that he does the cleaning. Saito, still groggy, responds lazily, telling her to just use the clean utensils for now. He'll do the dishes later, once they pile up. That's the last straw. Akane explodes, demanding that he wash them immediately. Saito shrugs, completely unfazed, and casually explains that he's used to cleaning only once a month, so he doesn't see what the big deal is. Akane freezes, her heart skipping a beat as she processes what he just said. Once a month. Her brain short-circuits at the sheer horror of it. Noticing her horrified expression, Saito raises an eyebrow and, with complete sincerity, tells her that she shouldn't be so against the idea of living with trash. After all, humans and garbage can coexist peacefully. Akane screams back, her voice full of frustration, declaring that she refuses to live in filth. She wants a proper, clean, and beautiful life, something Saito clearly doesn't care about. It's painfully obvious that they are complete opposites. Saito, ever the chaos incarnate, doesn't understand the fuss. He even questions why people take baths so frequently, while Akane is nearly in tears, unable to process the absolute disaster of a person she's stuck living with. Later that morning, as they walk to school, Akane marches ahead while Saito trails behind, lost in thought. He wonders how in the world they're going to survive this marriage when their values are so ridiculously different. That night, Saito is in his happy place, deeply immersed in the latest zombie game that just dropped. He's completely focused, blasting zombie heads left and right when Akane storms in, complaining about the noise. One glance at the screen, and her disgust is immediate. She slaps her hands over her eyes, cringing at the gory mess unfolding before her. Without hesitation, she orders him to stop playing. Saito, naturally, refuses. What starts as an argument quickly escalates into a full-blown tug-of-war over the console. Neither of them is willing to back down. Right in the middle of the chaos, the doorbell rings. Akane lets go of the console to go answer the door, and Saito, completely caught off guard, loses his balance. He stumbles backward, fumbling the console in his hands. And just like that, the game shuts off. A deep, eerie silence fills the room. Saito stands frozen, his eyes glued to the dark screen as the realization sinks in. Later that night, still mourning his loss, Saito finally decides to take a bath, mostly because even he can't stand how horrible he smells anymore. He lazily wraps a towel around his waist and heads to the bathroom. As soon as he steps inside, however, he freezes. Akane is already there, eyes closed, completely naked, completely unaware of his presence. She doesn't flinch, doesn't react, doesn't even acknowledge him. For a split second, his brain blue screens. Then, with the speed of a man who values his life, he turns around, his face burning with embarrassment. Just as he's about to step out, something nags at him. Why didn't she notice him? Even if she were just relaxing, she should have at least reacted to the door opening. A weird feeling creeps up his spine. He cautiously steps back inside and glances at her again. She's still in the exact same position, eyes closed, perfectly still. She's breathing, so she's not dead. But then it hits him. This is exactly how people drown. Panic sets in. Saito immediately calls out to her, trying to wake her up.